Citizens Advisory Board, our meeting for January 27th, 2011. It's the appointed hour. In your packet, you have the minutes of the previous meeting on December the 16th, 2010. And are there additions or corrections to those minutes?
I had a question. On each one it says Harding absent. Up above it says Kimberly Lowe was absent from the meeting. I was confused.
He simply just wasn't here for that particular vote.
Okay, it's every single vote all the way to the end. Is that right? Okay. So it's correct the way it says. Okay, that's fine.
Other corrections or additions? Shall we approve the minutes? Been moved. Is there a second? It's been moved and seconded that we approve the minutes of the December 16th meeting. All in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? They're approved. Item 3 on the agenda is a recommendation of a resolution to the City Council approving a contract with Populous for the MAF3 Convention Center site selection services. And Eric, you want to brief us on the memo that you have included in the packet about that subject?
I'd be happy to. Obviously, we've been discussing this contract for the last couple of months at the meetings, and then we've also had lots of discussions at the subcommittee level with the Convention Center Committee. But on December 21st, we were authorized by Council to begin negotiations with Populous. We began there shortly after the holidays, and included in your packet is this final draft for your consideration. It comes to us from the Convention Center Subcommittee. They did go through a detailed review, and we actually, at their request, provided an early scope of work before their meeting, so they had an opportunity to make comments and changes. But with that, we went through an extensive negotiated process, and you'll find that the final fee is included at $470,000. We do believe this is very fair and reasonable for the scope of work, and we did some background checks on some similar projects, and so it does fall in alignment with those. This is scheduled as we're trying to expedite for Council's consideration next Tuesday, February 1st, and they will begin work immediately following approval. They've confirmed that it is a 90-day work period. They're going to submit also a detailed schedule to staff that we'll be utilizing on a week-to-week basis. Obviously, there's going to be substantial weekly progress. There are meetings anticipated with the subcommittee in the form of workshops. We're also going to be engaging the City Council and others as well, and those are some of the things that you'll find in Exhibit A, which is the scope of work that drives the contract. But with that, staff is recommending approval and can answer any questions that you might have.
The subcommittee has approved this. Sue, did you want, Sue's the vice chair of that subcommittee, did you want to add anything, Sue? All right, then what is before you is the resolution that's in your packet. It has been recommended for approval by the subcommittee, and we provide it for you for action today. Is there a motion?
First, I have a question, if that's all right.
Oh, yes.
And Eric, and I've got a question or a comment on one particular part of it, and then maybe a proposed change, but depends on what you have to say about it. On page 3 of 15, and I can tell clearly at the end of their work, they will make a recommendation. It's obviously clear, and I guess that's a recommendation on the site. At page 3 of 15, or section 2A, and then it's number 4, it's contemplated here they'll have a draft of the report for review, and then it says incorporate all recommended changes. I start, I guess, my question with who recommends changes. It's not clear to me who can recommend changes, and it almost sounds as if they have to make a change made. And one concept I thought of, well, they may have their draft, they have they have the recommendation, and then somebody tells them we'll make a change. So I'm not clear who recommends a change, and it says they have to incorporate it. And then in comparison, in the exhibit where it lists what they will do at page A5, it's a little different. It says incorporate comments and submit the final report. That made more sense to me that they'll take comments, they'll consider those comments, they'll incorporate what they think about those comments, and then issue the final. So it's a little different from incorporate recommended changes. Again, I don't know who recommends the changes and if they have to make those changes.
As a part of our boilerplate to the contract that you have here, and what you'll find in most of the city contracting for architectural consulting or engineering services, you'll find that there's usually a director that is in charge. In the case for maps, 3, the program manager, myself, will be the one that makes those final recommendations. And so when we get through the draft reports and we go through the process, it will be myself directly providing to them a list of comments and any recommended changes. And I do see those as one and the same. A little bit different language than maybe what's in our city boilerplate, what's in the upfront and what you're reading from in the basic services versus what's in the scope of work. The boilerplate is something we use typically on most of our contracts, and then the scope of work is detailed specific to just this work, the convention center site selection. So honestly, from my position, I don't see a discrepancy. To us, it's the same, but ultimately, I as program manager have final authority to direct and recommend the changes to the consultant.
All right, well, before we proceed with further discussion, is there a motion for us to consider this resolution?
I move.
It's been moved that we adopt the resolution. Is there a second? It's been moved and seconded. Now, is there further discussion about the resolution itself or the contract?
Mr. Chairman, if I may, I think, the one thing I think to hopefully bring you some peace of mind is that this report, in its final form, with the changes incorporated, is going to be coming back to this advisory board. It's going to be going back to the subcommittee for review. So, if there were changes that were at the subcommittee level, at the advisory board level, and ultimately it goes to City Council for approval that maybe I didn't include or for some reason weren't transmitted to the consultant, we're going to have another opportunity to look at this. This isn't the final action for the work that will be completed by Populous.
But from your viewpoint, working with them, the language wouldn't make a substantial difference in the way you approach it?
No, it won't make any change at all.
Wesley, you feel okay about that?
Yes.
Okay. All right, is there further discussion? As many as favor the motion say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? The resolution is adopted. Item 4 is a consultant review committee report and a recommended resolution as well authorizing the negotiation of a contract with AIP, or Architects in Partnership. There's a memo from Eric in your packet about that. Would you like to bring us up to speed on that, Eric?
I will. There are actually 3 of these in your packet today. There are 3 different projects that we're asking for similar action, and that is authorization to negotiate contracts. This is just the first of those, and this is for the Senior Health and Wellness Center scope of work development. So this is a contract that we're prepared to proceed on. It's going to help us better understand what those Senior Health and Wellness Centers are. I think if you remember from previous comments that we just don't have the background information like we do on some of the other projects, and this is going to bring this project to that same level. We also received some valuable comments from the subcommittee on some items that staff will be using in the negotiation once authorized, and that's to include some of the demographic study information and some of the operational issues and things that have also come into question since we started this. 8 firms submitted, 3 were interviewed. We held the interviews in late December, and we are recommending authorizations with AIP, and then they have teamed with a national consultant, KMD, to assist them, who is in the health and wellness area.
This was considered by the subcommittee. Michael or Wayne, do you want to have any comment to add to this?
I concur with what Eric just said. We did meet and we did recommend it. And, a lot of good things came from this subcommittee. And we had 2 concurrent questions. One was like the chicken and egg, what should come first, the partners or the design of it? That's something we're going to discuss. And also defining what a senior is and what market that we really need to target. Eric shared with us that on approval, the timeline with this would be May to June. And we want to get going.
Anyone else?
I had the opportunity to sit in, as Dr. McDaniel did also, in the meeting. It was a very excellent meeting where they discussed this. Just a couple of things from the council perspective. The question was asked in dealing with a partner, who is going to run this? And this is what the consultant study is going to address, among other things. They asked the question, how much money was the council's desire to put into running a center after the center was built? And I didn't even speak to that. I just held up this right here, which is the paradigm, that the challenge that we're throwing out there. There is no money in the MAPS 3 plan to operate the wellness center. And then the second thing that the committee is aware of is the council's desire to move this on as fast a track as possible so that at least one center can be supplied to our senior citizens, whoever that's recommended to be, at a location that the subcommittee and everybody feels comfortable with, to get that into operation as soon as possible. And so both of those goals were met, and the subcommittee did an excellent job, and I commend them for the work that they did in bringing this contract to us.
I concur. Will you have any other comments? We have before you the resolution authorizing the staff to negotiate a contract with Architects in Partnership to provide the scope of work development services for the senior health and wellness centers. Is there a motion to approve that resolution?
I move that we approve the...
Wayne has moved that we approve it. Is there a second? It's been moved and seconded that we adopt this resolution. Is there further discussion? All in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? It is adopted. And I want to say in passing that I did attend that meeting as well, and I congratulate the subcommittee for the work they did. That was, and I think they have received the message from the council and will be moving forward with it as quickly as reasonably possible. All right, we're ready for item 5, which is to receive a consultant review committee report and recommend negotiation of a contract with Elliott and Associates with regard to the MAPS 3 Oklahoma River windscreen. Eric, would you brief us on that?
Yes, this and the next item are actually both related to the river. We actually interviewed these also on the same day. On the windscreen project, as you recall, several months ago, we were approached by Mike Knopp and somewhat the Oklahoma Boathouse Foundation to try to improve at least the windscreen and the lighting projects at the river for some upcoming events that they have scheduled later this summer. The windscreens, as we have found, are going to be a lot more complicated than maybe anticipated, and so I'm not optimistic, although we're going to begin the work quickly, that we can hopefully have all that done by the end of the summer. But as we move and make progress, there are several other events that are going to be able to benefit from such windscreens, and so proceeding with this is a good thing. There were 3 firms that submitted. We interviewed all 3. Elliott and Associates came out on top through the consultant selection procedure. They've done considerable work on the river already as a part of the boathouses and some of the other improvements, and staff is recommending approval.
All right. Here's the comments from the committee. Dee?
Nothing other than we realize that these have to be done so that we can bring bigger venues in, and they're important elements, so we would really recommend they get done.
All right. Further discussion? Is there a motion to adopt the resolution?
So moved.
Sue moves that we adopt this resolution authorizing the staff to negotiate the contract with Elliott and Associates. Is there a second? Second. Been moved and seconded. Further discussion? All in favor of the motion say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? It is adopted. Item number 6 is the companion item that Eric has talked about. Would you brief us on that, Eric?
Similar, again, it was interviewed the same day. I think what's unique about the lighting project, this is a sports lighting of the Oklahoma River Race Course for the 1,000 meters that occurs between Lincoln and I-35. And I think what's unique and what we've been told before is that Oklahoma City is a one-of-a-kind when it comes to night racing. They've sponsored this before. They're doing it with temporary lights, but this will make that a permanent operation for them so that they can host that at basically any given time. We are comfortable with the schedule on this, and our target is to have these ready by the end of the summer, and so we're ready to proceed quickly. Would anticipate we'll be bringing back a contract next month and proceed thereafter. We recommend approval.
Any comment about that, Dee?
No, I would just like to say that we did meet down at the Devon Boathouse, our committee, and that was wonderful. It gave us an opportunity to look around, see what's going to be happening on both sides of the river, and it was really a good opportunity. I'd encourage other committees to do some kind of field trip like that too.
All right. Shall we adopt this resolution? Is there a motion? Kimberly moves the adoption of this resolution. Is there a second? Been moved and seconded. Is there further discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? It is adopted. Item 7 is the resolution approving a real estate purchase agreement. Eric, will you brief us on that?
I'd be happy to, Mr. Chairman. There are two real estate purchase agreements in your packet today. This is the first of those two. This is for parcel V21. We have included inadvertently the wrong contract in this item with the packets that were distributed to you, so you have a handout in front of you that is the correct contract. The contracts are form agreements, and so they're not substantially different. What you'll find, of course, is that it has the corrected information for the legal descriptions in the total. The memo is accurate. You'll see that closing is scheduled to occur within 45 days of council's approval. This is one of the Skydance Bridge properties, as is the other item on our agenda today. They're necessary for us to acquire to begin that Skydance Bridge construction, which is scheduled later this spring, early summer, and can answer any questions that you may have.
Well, just to make sure we're together, it is properly described in the agenda, so there are no notice issues. And you have in front of you the copy of the correct real estate contract that was passed out in advance. Are there questions about that?
Simple question, Eric. I guess the appraised value compared to the purchase price on this one and the next one, I was just curious what you think about. Both of them were a decent percentage higher than the appraised value.
We're finding some variance with that, and in this case, this one's about $46,000 more than the appraised, and we have tasked Okira to do their due diligence, and we do have Joe Van here, and I think he can offer additional comments if necessary, but we've asked them to do their very best to negotiate these agreements. And our overall goal is to avoid the condemnation process and lengthening. And so if we find that the contracts are within reason and we find that they're within our available budgets, which they are, we're going to be bringing those forward for approval.
Kimberly?
Also, in our subcommittee meeting, we did talk about the fact, but with the landowner, there was some property that was actually offered at a really great rate. So encompassing both of them in the long run, it makes the entire picture much more appeasable than it may appear in this position.
Further questions? All right, shall we adopt this resolution? Is there a motion? Motion's been made, we approve it, and now seconded. Is there further discussion? All in favor of the motion say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? The resolution is adopted. And then the companion resolution for the other parcel, which is V28, Eric?
This one's also a Skydance parcel, and what I probably should have mentioned is, as an informational item, just so that you have some reference to where these are located, there is an updated property acquisition map at the back of your agenda for you to review. To respond again to Mr. LaForge's question, this one's about $16,000 more, so from a cost perspective, it's not considerably more dollars, but if you look at it from a percentage perspective, it is quite high. But we are recommending approval.
All right. Shall we approve this? Is there a motion? Motion's been made that we approve. Is there a second? It's been moved and seconded that we adopt this resolution. Further discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? The resolution is adopted. We have some guests with us today to make a presentation. Eric, would you be nice enough to introduce them for us?
Be happy to. We were fortunate this week at our River Subcommittee meeting to have Nathan Hart with the American Indian Cultural Center come give us an update as to the work and progress that's occurring out there. I think, as Dee mentioned, we had our meeting actually at the Devon Boathouse, and so it gave us a unique opportunity not only to look at some of the river events, but out of the glass, out of the room that the meeting was held in, we could actually see a lot of that work in place, and so it was a unique opportunity. But a wonderful presentation. We wanted to bring that to the advisory board as just some additional updates of other projects that are in the vicinity of some of the MAP 3 work that's going to happen in the future. So, Nathan, thank you for being here.
Great, thank you. Mr. Chairman and board members, thank you for the opportunity to be here to give you an update on the American Indian Cultural Center and Museum. I'm Nathan Hart. I'm Director of Community Affairs for the Native American Cultural and Education Authority. This authority is a state agency that was created in 1994 and given the purpose of designing, constructing, and operating an American Indian Cultural Center and Museum in the state of Oklahoma. One of the first activities that the authority undertook was to get a request for proposals from different cities statewide. Through that process, the city of Oklahoma City was awarded the site selection, and since that time, the project has really moved forward. What I'd like to do is give you a kind of a brief update of the reason for a cultural center here in Oklahoma and give you an update of our construction progress to date. If we step back and think historically about North America, if you look at the tribal governments that are here in Oklahoma today, of the 39 tribes, they represent a geographic region spreading all throughout the central part of North America, the Northeast, and even up to the Great Lakes region. It was actually the federal policies that began in the 1830s that began to remove these tribes from their homelands to Oklahoma. That is really what makes Oklahoma unique, is this convergence of cultures, this policy of the federal government that launched this removal of the tribes from their homelands to what at that time was Indian Territory. Today it is the state of Oklahoma. This is the historic reservation boundaries of the tribes. Those 39 tribal governments reside here today. Over history, 67 tribes have had a presence in this geographic area that we now know as Oklahoma. That makes us unique, unlike any other state in the country, and a lot of people feel that this is a story that is unlike any other place in the world. That is the reasoning behind the Cultural Center being here in Oklahoma. Oklahoma City, as I said, was awarded the site selection. Here's a rendering, actually the photograph of where we are. Many of you may know we're right near the downtown area, Interstates 35 and 40, right by the river. In 2005, the land was transferred from the city of Oklahoma City to the state of Oklahoma. We had a ground blessing ceremony in the fall of 2005, and the construction on the project began in 2006. Historically, now we've had some challenges because historically the site in the 1930s was part of Oklahoma Oil Field Number 1. At the time it was the highest producing oil field in the country, state capital to the area we are down to south part of Oklahoma City. That's the field we were part of. Of the 240 acres that we have to develop on right now, there are 57 wells that are on record as being drilled on our site. This is what the site looked like when we took it over. The first package was to do a lot of lay the infrastructure work and do a lot of the landform sculpting. Began with the construction of the building, planting of some of the grasses, all bringing us up to this is what the future vision of our site is. There are several components of our site. If you think of it as a 240-acre cultural site, we have at the core, the heart of this is the Cultural Center and Museum. We have several other components, and that being our commercial development area. We have plans for a hotel conference center and some retail spaces as well. In the immediate construction area, which you see on this rendering labeled as a cultural center site itself, a 60-acre area. There were on record being 14 wells. We discovered 16, and those have been capped. The rest of the site, we still have some cleanup and some site remediation to do on that. Historically, in Oklahoma, if we think back who the tribes are indigenous to this area, they are the mound-building cultures. In eastern Oklahoma, spiral mounds is part of a network of mounds all throughout the central part and the southeast part of the United States. You may be familiar with Cahokia Mounds in St. Louis and some of the other mounds, Etowah Mounds. There's a network, there's a trade relationship that took place. Exchange of good is evidenced by what was found in these mounds. That was one of the inspirations for the architectural design. Honoring the indigenous people of this area, the mound builders, is the reason that we have the large promontory mound feature out at our site. Here's a photograph from the rendering from the top of the mound looking back at the Cultural Center. One of our other iconic features is the Hall of the People. That is a large white steel structure that you see. If we think about some of the other tribes, the Wichita as an example, but many of the others who at the central part of their villages had large gathering places for the community, whether it be the grass huts, the teepees, or the longhouses, that was the architectural influence for that large Hall of the People. There's just a rendering. This is one of the photographs when the steel construction began over a year ago, to a more recent photograph, and what the rendering is going to look like when that facility is completed. Here's the view as you're driving up. This is a slightly older photograph where you see to your right on this the yellow insulation. You don't see that now because we have the steel going up for the continuation of this building. In August of this year, the entire building of this Cultural Center will be enclosed. After that is all the interior work, and we're moving forward right now with a completion date set of the spring of 2015. This completion date is also part of the entire package, which is the hotel conference center and the retail space as well. Here's a few renderings of what you'll experience when you come onto the site. sort of think back historically of the tribes that are in Oklahoma today, they belong to 12 language groups. And so one of the features that the general public will experience are these sound posts. These sound posts represent the language groups of the tribes. High up on these posts is a wind chime that when the wind blows, you hear natural sound resonate from these. And these do represent the languages that are here today. Some of the other renderings as we're moving through, you enter the building from the east. This is our east gate, the rendering to the actual photograph of the construction as it is now. Several of the interior spaces, this is our Community Voices Theater. It's just a venue for performances and storytelling. That's a photograph of construction. Here's a rendering of what will take place in there. Our exhibit design firm is Ralph Applebaum Associates. They're from New York. They're most noted for the exhibits at the Holocaust Memorial Museum in Washington, D.C. They've done some other projects closer to this area. Liberty Memorial up in Kansas City. They did the exhibits for the Clinton Library in Arkansas as well. Here are some of the renderings of what just moving through our site. There's a combination of exhibit areas, smaller theater spaces. Again, this really focuses on the history of not only Oklahoma, but this region here in the central United States, beginning in the 1500s. That's when the first encounter was, documented encounter of a non-native culture moving through this area that we now know as Oklahoma, up till present day. This is the rendering of the site. There are just a few other architectural features I'd like to note here as we look at this site. A lot of people may know the passageway. We call it the Eastgate Passage. It's a large tunnel that goes through the promontory. It actually functions to move people from the interior of this large promontory to all the activities taking place on the exterior. But it does have some unique alignment features, as do other parts of the facility. This shot is looking from that promontory mound to the east through our entranceway, and you can see the sun rising on the equinox days in the spring and the fall. The sun rises in direct alignment with our entryway. That's a 2009 photograph. Here's a photograph this past September of 2010. Our targeted opening date wants to coincide with the spring equinox, the rising of the sun coming straight through our entryway. So it will be in March of 2015 is our targeted opening date. The tunnel that I just talked about, during the sunset of the winter solstice, the sun lines right up with this tunnel. There's the actual photograph from 2 years ago. And in the summertime, the setting of the sun, the summer solstice sets right behind the peak of that promontory mound. So these are just some of the highlights of some of our architectural features, some of the landscape features of the project. Again, it focuses on the tribes that are here, the reason that they're now located here in Oklahoma. Here's an actual photograph from the river looking up at our site, current construction. There's a lot to do. We have a budget. It's estimated that there's $170 million to develop this cultural center museum and do some of the site cleanup. This is a shot of the area to the west of the cultural center. This is taken from I-35. There's a lot of runoff that comes from the industrial area to our south and from the interstate that travels right across our site into the river where there's a lot of public events. Our plans are to help clean up this part of the river through the planting of our vegetation and the trees. We want to begin to naturally filter out some of the contaminants that are in this water and really clean this area up so it's a use for public space. Now there's a lot of rowing activity on the river. We understand that. We want to have some rowing trails on our site as well. Here's a kind of a photograph of some of the rowing activities when some of the collegiate teams were on the river. The aerial photograph of our site, if we're looking at this, the lower part, which is the flat right near the river, that's where the commercial area is going to go, the hotel right near the river, the conference center, and some of the retail shops. Just in your agenda today, you're talking about the 1,000-meter races, and you can see the Interstate Bridge, Interstate 35 Bridge, that's the starting line for the 1,000-meter races. On this photograph, about in alignment with where those trees are in the central part of the photograph, that's about the approximate starting line for the 2,000-meter races. So a lot of longer races are right there starting in front of our site. So we're in dialogue a lot with the people that are associated with the river, particularly the Boathouse Foundation people, and we want to work together so that our site also accommodates the usage of the river as well. That is a quick update of where we are. As I mentioned before, it's a $170 million project for the Cultural Center and Museum and some of the surrounding landscape area. It's estimated that the private sector development of the hotel, conference center, and retail shops is about a $90 to $100 million investment. All of this is planned to take place and be available to the general public on our opening day of 2015.
Are there questions from members of the committee?
I have one question, either for Nathan or Eric, either one of them. Thank you very much for the presentation. It looks great. Progress is good, and I think it's great designs and everything. And really important to this MAPS 3, the project, so obviously that's why you're here. But I think it's become more apparent to me as you were speaking how many of the projects interrelate. I'm sure ADG, who's here, is keeping it in mind, and that's why you're here. And it's great with the, obviously, the river, which is right there, incorporating it together. Where the convention center goes, I can imagine we have people in town, and then where's it going to be in relation to this center? More specifically, though, the only question I had was for either of you, transit and trails, what do you expect access to get out there? It's a little bit of a different distance from downtown, but it's not so far you can't walk, or, I mean, is there any plan yet, or are we just thinking of how we're going to get out there from downtown?
Well, from a river trails perspective, there are existing trails that are in that vicinity, and there's a master plan to complete even additional trails, for interconnectivity between downtown and the other area lakes. And so that's a part of the trails, part of MAPS 3, is to make those connections. When we talk about convention centers and things, I mean, those are some of the criteria that they're going to be looking at for best placement. And then when we look at things that are more specific to, like, the river projects, I mean, there's going to be this very close coordination with the MAPS 3 river improvements. How does that starting line look? What improvements may or may not, be compatible uses? And so we're going to be working very, very closely with the American Indian Cultural Center on those. From a transit perspective, they are looking at, routes, stops, and different things, and so I know that will go into consideration. I think one of the things that's limiting on the MAPS 3 transit side is that it's really maxed at about 6 miles for the budget, and so they're going to be somewhat limited on how far they can stretch out with the MAPS project.
Okay, and then I guess, and I'm just more curious, how far is it? Can you walk very easily? If somebody's staying downtown, if the convention center's downtown, is it going to be easy to walk? How far is it from one to the other?
Well, in meter perspectives, from the finish line is 2,000 meters to our site. It is walkable. You asked about the trails, and if you're familiar with the sort of the citywide trail system, the biking trails and running trails that link up, the Dell City area and coming through up to the Hefner area, those trails come across our site. We're in dialogue and coordination right now. They're part of our master plan, and so our site will be linked up with the other trails along the river.
I think some of the other things that we saw in the presentation, too, is ultimately they're actually looking to build some on-site tributaries, so to speak, that you could actually bring some of the canoes and kayaks onto the American Indian Cultural Center site off of the river. And so there's some master plan opportunities, I think, for that kind of travel, too. But it is quite a distance to go from downtown to the river, and the new park is going to help make that connection. But as you locate the River Boathouse area, I mean, it's still considerable distance, 2,000 meters. A mile or so as you start looking in that direction, east from there if you're looking at it from a pedestrian level. But it's very accessible with a bicycle, rollerblades, those things that access the trails regularly.
Slightly more than a leisurely walk, but that's a distance a lot of people like to walk.
Let me add, too, Rusty, from the Transit Committee last night, we discussed some of the follow-on concepts that would branch off from the central spine, so to speak, of the downtown Oklahoma City circulator. And we did discuss the possibility that something could go to the Boathouse District and even as far as that. So it is in the back of our minds, but it wouldn't be covered by this initial MAPS 3 portion.
Kimberly?
This may be diversing a little bit, but I also see this as an opportunity as the city grows for businesses to develop that augment those services, such as a tour bus type of company that can take visitors from downtown to this area, so that as we're bringing things into the city, we're allowing businesses within the city to prosper, grow, and benefit from that growth as well.
Other comments or questions? Nathan, we really appreciate you being here.
I'm sorry, Tom.
I'm sorry, Dee.
Just real quickly, we do have the bridge connecting both sides of the river. Is that going to be the only connection between the banks?
The bridges that connect the river are really like the Lincoln Bridge and some of the other vehicular bridges. The Skydance Bridge is going to connect the two halves of the park. I'm not
Right.
sure if that's what you were maybe referencing.
No, we were talking at the river about how it's important to connect one side of the river with the other. Will that also help lead us over here?
I think it
Is
will,
that
and,
the only-
and we have those connections now, I think, to some degree. I think when we talk from the river perspective, we're talking about adding some elevators to provide ADA accessible connections too. And so, but yeah, I think that there's going to be opportunities, but mostly it's going to be from the existing vehicular bridges. It's quite expensive to build a bridge across the riverway.
Okay, thank you.
As you talk about that, Dee, I was just thinking, is your committee thinking about having the, what I'll call the grandstand, or the place for spectators at the races? Isn't that going to be on the south side of the river? Is that what's contemplated?
That is the projected location, yes.
So getting across the river will be an item. Yeah. Anything else? Nathan, thank you so much. We really appreciate you being here today. All right. We are ready for item 10, and that is our general discussion area, any action items regarding MAP 3. Do you have anything for us under that?
I do have just a couple of items. As you've witnessed in the subcommittee meetings, ADG has been very much a part of attending those, and we're working towards having them make presentations at the future subcommittee meetings in preparation of the implementation plan. And so they're collecting all this data, and they're going to be coming back to you in individual subcommittee. They're also going to continue to attend, and we have Nicole Franklin here with us today. And so we appreciate their work, but you're going to actually start seeing some draft documentation be developed for your input, and so expect that in the coming months. We also have, as we mentioned, several projects that are now underway, and so we'll start bringing additional updates. I do have Joe Van here. I wanted to give Joe Van with Oklahoma City Urban Renewal Authority an opportunity to update the status of the property acquisition, and we do have the map that is included, again, as your reference. He's going to continue to update this monthly, and of course, this is the map that has the different shades of blue. So, Joe Van, we appreciate you being here as well. Thank you.
Certainly. Good morning, Mr. Chairman and committee members. I don't know if Mark's pulling the map up, but I think you do have a map in with your packet there. What I would just point out to you is that we have the update from the previous meeting, the new V21, which was on your agenda today for purchase, and also V28. The other changes that from the previous month are parcels V10, V11, and V15 are now showing up as offers being made to the owners of the property. We have finally located and did get return receipt card back from the last property owner that had been very difficult to track down. We have additional 4 more title commitments done by the title company, additional 4 more surveys done by our survey consultant, Johnson & Associates. We have an additional appraisal inspection that has been completed, and 1 more additional appraisal from last month. So we are moving ahead, and hopefully we can start bringing 2 or 3 a month before the committee. But we'd be happy to answer any questions you might have.
Questions for Joe Van? Zane?
Yes, I have one. V29 there, I really couldn't tell from the black and white legend. Is that tied up in litigation?
It has now been, I believe condemnation has been filed on V29.
And just to update, V29 is one of the Skydance parcels, and we're on a pretty tight timeline to get that acquired, or at least get a right of entry so that construction can begin later this spring. We've asked Okura to proceed with those negotiations in as much as possible, but we did go ahead and file that condemnation this month to help ensure that we could get to the end and make that happen. The only other updates I'll provide on the map while it's up is that, of course, the post office demolition is underway. It's the large blue box that you see here. If you've had an opportunity to drive south, you'll see that that has a lot of holes in the building. They've abated most of the asbestos that's wrapping up. They're salvaging the last of the materials. We're hoping to give you a projected date, but it's about 6 weeks where that building will actually now come down. It's ready to actually be torn down, and what's going to be visible behind that is the historic Union train station. It'll be a lot more visible as we traverse east and west across Oklahoma City. Thank you, Joanne. I have one additional update, and it's a handout that we provided as an item. This is related to MAPS 3 in regard to the Central Park project. And so each of you has a 4-page handout, and it has a picture of a rendering of the Robinson ramp. This is not the Skydance Bridge. This is actually the vehicular ramp that's being constructed as a part of the I-40 relocation project. Robinson will be one of those streets that goes over the new I-40. And so they're in the midst of constructing this, and it's at grade, meaning that it's not on piers. It's going to be an earthen ramp. And so if you can picture at the top of this drawing, this is where the cars will come up from downtown on the right side of the page, and as they head from right to left on this page, it's where they'll go over the interstate, and then they'll come back down on the other side. Well, its relevance to the park is that this is on that southeast edge of the park. This will actually be somewhat of a barrier or a wall that's going to be somewhat created there, as the park is going to be just on the other side of this. And one of the things that was included in the ODOT contract was making sure that a hole to provide emergency vehicle access and pedestrian access was placed through this. And they are constructing this now, but we were approached a little over 2 weeks ago whether or not we wanted to convert it from a rectangular box to an arch. But it comes at additional cost. And so what I've included as a part of the packet, these are not renderings of the Robinson Bridge, but this is what ODOT was able to provide, at least so that you could see to some degree the difference between an arch and a box. The last document is the cost difference, and it's about $170,000. So I brought this to the Park Subcommittee for their consideration and asked for them to provide a recommendation to staff whether we should pursue converting what's currently being constructed as a box to an arch, and we've received a confirmation from them that they'd like to pursue that. But I wanted to also bring that to the advisory board because we may need to, as staff, take action before we meet next month. Staff may need to go ahead and go to City Council, getting that formal authorization before we can meet, because this is in construction and they're on a very tight timeline. So I wanted to bring that to you. I don't need a formal action today, but I would like to seek a recommendation from the board that staff pursue an arch if that's in agreement with the board as it was with the Parks Subcommittee.
Zane?
I have a question, Eric. It's representing, along with our subcommittee chairman Harding here, one of the proposed or ideal paths for the light rail or the streetcar was along Robinson. Would the arch versus the square boxes would make a difference as far as if we wanted to extend in the future rails for a streetcar system to go across that bridge?
I don't believe it changes any of the loading characteristics of this bridge or the weight that it can carry. It's really just an aesthetic change.
Okay.
What I can tell you about the arch, though, is clearly as you look at the box would be constructed to allow a large, emergency vehicle like a fire engine into the park. The arch will actually be nominally bigger because of the curvature of the sides. A box would have to fit within it. So part of the cost is the fact that it's a larger opening, but we haven't been advised that it makes any changes to the bridge itself, and this would be just an earthen bridge. And so I think it would remain the opportunity that, if that were pursued in the future, that it could accommodate the transit options.
Okay.
Kimberly or Michael, do you all want to add anything to that from your committee?
Thank you, Tom. No, just Eric portrayed that just very accurately. Actually, most of the subcommittee meeting yesterday was this discussion about the arch. And along with that, I think there was this sense that we really want to make sure that on that whole area, that landscaping, I don't know the appropriate word, landscaping, horticulture, that there be more to that area that would really fill that in other than just that kind of wall there. That was the sense of the subcommittee, I think, felt pretty strongly about that.
I think what we're talking about here is something called architheming, Walt Disney Studios uses that a lot, where they breach elements so that as you merge through all spaces, they have continual shapes that repeat each other, and it adds continuity all throughout the project. And I know we don't have an architectural review committee established over all these projects, but if you look at the big scope, everything that we have are all based on geometric shapes, and almost, I would say, 90 to 95% of them are in that circular native, so I think this complements everything that we're doing a lot as well.
Again, with your recommendation, and we will probably bring back more or less an informational item. I mean, we will have to take action before next month, but I will update you as to council's desire as well. But I wanted to forward your recommendation to them if it were in favor or not in favor of us moving forward.
And Michael, the committee, and Kim, the committee yesterday endorsed this idea, did they not? Well, in terms of giving Eric some direction, is there anyone who opposes us going forward with the idea of the arch rather than the box? If not, Eric, then I think that authorizes the staff to move forward, and you can report back to us at the appropriate time.
Will do. Thank you. I don't have any other updates today.
All right. Well, we have then item 11 on our agenda is the subcommittee reports. I know that that many of the subcommittees have brought forward items today, and we've already heard from subcommittees, but if there are additional subcommittee reports or items, this would be an appropriate time. Any subcommittee chair or vice chair want to make a report?
I'd like to. The Convention Center Subcommittee, I'd just like to tell you a couple additional points so you get a sense of what we have with our subcommittee. We're looking excitedly at the timeline of 90 days. So we anticipate seeing some kind of report in 90 days. Looking at the calendar, that means sometime in April we'll see this report. We anticipate that by the time we get to the report and the recommendation, we'll have enough information as a subcommittee that will feel solid on our recommendation to you. If you look at the contract pieces that we approved today, there's two pieces there that I draw your attention to. One is the Exhibit A, and that's Section C, that's the scope of work. So as you're interested in what we're doing, what Populous will be guiding their discussion and getting information from other people, that's that Exhibit A. Also, there'll be several people that Populous will work with in our area locally, and that's part of Exhibit D. So that might be important to you. We anticipate having a work session with Populous soon, within the next month. That'll be our first session. And one of the things that the committee is very interested in is making sure that we represent and keep in mind benefits to all the stakeholders. One thing we know we've got to get some definition on is the area that we're looking at. In the scope of work, it talks about downtown. Well, what exactly is downtown? So that's one of the charges we feel like soon we can have some definition. You know, is it a 10-mile area? Is it a 15-mile area? What do we consider downtown? Because that's what we're going to look at for a site. I think another important point is, as committee members, maybe you have been approached, hey, we've got this piece, this parcel, we'd like to get it considered. Well, we are very fortunate that we can say anybody that has that inquiry, just send them to Eric. He's said he'd be glad to field all those informational questions. So fortunately for us, we've got our project manager in Eric to do that. And the other important piece is that we will narrow the sites down to 3, and then those 3 will really receive the additional screening, the infrastructure, the exterior, how does it support a hotel site, all of those pieces. So.
Thank you, Sue. Other subcommittees?
Yeah, Tom, just a comment or two. First of all, I'm with the Wellness Centers Subcommittee, and I sure want to thank Rusty for agreeing to switch with the fairgrounds and the subcommittee and the Wellness Centers, because I have a prior commitment on Tuesday afternoons. And so I think I owe Rusty lunch. He pretty much told me that. I guess that's better than dinner. But with that said, Eric, I missed the meeting, and in the scope of work, I just wanted, if it's not too late, I'd like to suggest that the consultant that we hire include focus groups, the opportunity to have focus groups. And I don't know if that was in this, you were thinking that already, but I certainly would like to request that be considered as we look at the programming, particularly in terms of the programming of the Wellness Centers.
I will do that.
Wayne, did you want to add anything about that?
Yeah, yes, Mike, we did talk about focus groups and surveys and other things to try to really figure out what the citizens in Oklahoma City want. You know, we talked about a wellness center in Little Rock. People in Little Rock may not be the same as the people in Oklahoma City. And then the biggest concern was really, what's the senior? Is it a 45-year-old? Is it a 60-year-old, 65-year-old, 80-year-old? They don't want to see the same thing. You know, 45s want to do what 45s want to do. And 80, they trying to do what they can do, you know, and get better at it, you know. And I listened to his report, and someone asked the question, what kind of accessibility to transportation is going to be from wherever the Wellness Center to the American Indian Culture Center? Well, that might be one of our goals, to get them to the shape that they can get there. But the 45-year-old we know can get there. So we got to define what senior is.
Thank you. Any other subcommittees? Zane?
Yeah, I'll give a subcommittee for the modern streetcar and transit. Subcommittee Chairman Harding gave the members a homework assignment to provide their ideas, thoughts, recommendations, and possible proposals for routes for kicking off the streetcar. They did that and presented their ideas last night, and out of that it became apparent that a common spur or spine was coming to the forefront, and we're looking at that, and we're going to bring forth recommendations to identify these common areas or common themes or common paths so that we can get that information to Project 180 and that they can take the consideration for the utilities, layout of utilities. So, Eric, when will those recommendations be presented to the board? And by board, I mean, when will they come forward to this committee?
So what I gained from last night was there were some preliminary recommendations. They didn't want, I mean, they had worked for about 2 hours, and obviously there was a lot of input and a lot of thought, and as they wrapped up, they came to some common agreement. I think one of the things I'll share too is it's very close also to what the Alternatives Analysis Steering Committee has come up with, so there is some commonalities that are there. But we're going to work somewhat with the information that was provided last night, knowing that the two different groups have alignment. But I think what we wanted to reserve was to reserve until the next meeting to do more of a confirmation process. There still was a couple small questions, I think, that were out there. But we'll be prepared to formalize that in more of such a place where we can actually get that up to the council's receiving it as well. And so we'll be prepared to do that hopefully over the next month.
Now, did you want to add anything? Yes, sir.
In that discussion at the end of the meeting, they asked for a council perspective, and I was very, very encouraged. And I've been asked by several people, what's the modern streetcar system going to be? And I tell them this, that I'm committed, I think your council is committed, I hope you all are committed, to having roughly a 6-mile transportation system that will have rails that are in the ground, that will be up to date in its design, and stay tuned for particulars later on. But the commitment is, because there were some questions, people said, are we committed to a modern streetcar with tracks in the ground? And I think the answer to that is emphatically, would you agree, Eric? Yes.
Yes.
And so I think you need, if you're approached by people about that, you need to give them that assurance, because in the past couple of weeks, there's been some comments made that might, confuse some people, but
I'd like to add to that yes, right now, that the MAPS 3 part is just the 5 to 6 mile radius, but that by no means is the end of it. I think that we're thinking that beyond that, and where can it go beyond MAPS 3? So we're providing opportunity for that growth too.
so this is the seed to start mass transit, or public transit, or whatever you want to call it, throughout central Oklahoma. But this is what this project is focused on, that will spread out. And the committee did an excellent job of taking a vision of what could be in the future and coming down the line. I'm going to be commended on that.
All right, thank you. Any other subcommittee? Rusty?
Yeah, real quick, fairgrounds. We haven't mentioned the fairgrounds at all, but I do want to give a brief report. We went back over, Tim O'Toole, who's a member of our subcommittee, and he's also the head of State Fair Parking, updated us and went through the master plan, which this advisory board has already seen. So we got a little more detail, and he continues to be very helpful in what we may do there. We also quickly reviewed the resolution that City Council adopted before it went to a vote of what was approved for our project, and it's just improvements to the fairgrounds. So we then discussed a little more about possibilities of what we may do. Expo Hall, which has been considered a lot previous even, was certainly one of the main ones that would look like will be a recommendation for ADG to consider for a major improvement. Other possible improvements were additional parking, entrance improvements, and potentially a pedestrian bridge to connect the Newark Arena to the Expo Hall, assuming such a Expo Hall is built. Also encourage the rest of the subcommittee members, if there were other ideas for improvements, to make sure we bring them quickly for ADG to consider. And if anybody here has any other ideas, to pass on to me or any of our subcommittee members, or directly to ADG for the fairgrounds. And also, real quick, I understand a lot of the subcommittees are wanting their projects to be first, but a comment was also suggested to ADG for the fairgrounds being a direct economic driver and revenue producer, of why it might make a lot of sense to be one of the first projects. I hear everybody wants to be first, but a comment was made by one of our members, and just want everybody else to know that. That's the reasoning behind our subcommittee. And lastly, just generally, I might recommend everybody, maybe everybody's doing it or it's obvious, but reading the minutes of all the subcommittees has been very helpful. We get the reports here, but I've been reading the minutes and appreciate city staff doing a great job in all these meetings, coming up with helpful minutes. I've been reading each one, just real quickly the minutes, and it gets you an update of all the projects. Appreciate the city staff making sure we're getting those in there, and they're very helpful.
Thank you, Rusty.
Thanks.
All right, other subcommittees? All right, then let's move to the informational items, and one that we're all interested in. Eric, you're going to tell us about the revenue and expenditure report.
Yeah, the report's, just, again, it's end of November. We've closed on the information there. Obviously, the sales tax collections continue to be about target city for the city, and the MAPS 3 fund is a city fund, and so we're encouraged by that. I think that we expect things to continue at the pace that they are in 2011, and so I don't have any concern about sales tax collections. I know Mr. Adams contacted me, and I just wanted to point this out in case there are other questions on the report, but you'll notice this month that there is no interest posted on here, and assuming that question might be raised, just wanted to explain that the city finance division has changed the way that they are calculating interest proceeds citywide on investment income as it pertains to bond investments. And so there's been a modification that's requiring a correction in the way that it's being accounted for, and so that correction requires that the months of November and December that no money will be posted, more or less. And so once that correction is made, we'll start seeing that on future reports return almost to normal. So I just wanted to make that comment that there's been a change in city procedure on how those are posted, and just make sure that you knew that it was not an error on the report. This is correct.
Michael, did you have a question about that?
I had visited with Eric yesterday about that situation, and I think the important thing probably to note is that it doesn't impact the total cash that ultimately will be received. It's just kind of a period accounting change in what periods they're recognizing the interest, but the same interest will be collected. It's just going to be recognized slightly differently.
Okay.
Tom, quick question.
Yes, Michael.
As I recall, Eric, the report was for the fiscal year to date on tax collection. remind us when the actual MAPS 3 taxes were, when that started? Was it the last quarter of last fiscal year?
It's April 1st. So the sales tax collections for MAPS 3 started April 1st. So the one-year anniversary is coming up.
So those monies, that report, doesn't include the quarter from last fiscal year?
You know, if you look at, so the fiscal year begins July 1.
Yeah.
Yes. But the total that you see to the far right is all inclusive of all previous years.
Other questions about the revenue and expenditures? Well, great. The Downtown Central Park property acquisition status map. Eric?
We have no further updates from what Jovan has already provided, unless there are questions.
All right. This is the opportunity for comments. I wanted to offer just one. In addition to Councilman McAtee being an ex officio member of all the committees and attending a good number of the meetings, as do I, several other council members have been attending some of the meetings, and each one of them said to me in the meetings that have gone on over the last couple of days that they would like for me to share with you that they're there only because of some interest. They're just interested in how the process is going and want to get a feel for it, but there was no agenda on their part, and there was nothing of going on in the subcommittees of which they had any concern, but they were just interested in particular items, and they will from time to time be attending subcommittee meetings, and so you should not take that as any sign of concern, but only a sign of interest in what's going on. And if they have any questions for us, they will route them to us through Councilman McAtee or in an appropriate fashion. So anyway, as you continue these subcommittee meetings, know that there will be council members coming in and out from time to time because they're interested. Is that a fair assessment, Councilman McAtee?
Yeah, I think the interest level is very, very high. The commitment is very, very high. And of course, the overarching goal is to deliver to the citizens the products that were promised in the MAPS 3 initiative ballot within the scope of the budget. And Eric has thrown out on several occasions the time period of 10 years. That may or may not occur. This is a lengthy process, and just kind of stay tuned, and the progress that's being made, I think, is very, very gratifying for all the people that are concerned.
Thank you. Other comments by members of the advisory board? Staff? Eric, anyone from the staff have other comments? Well, we would invite citizens that are here today, if there are any comments by others, members of the public that are here, this is your opportunity to be heard. Are there? If not, we stand adjourned. Thank you.